Hi everybody and welcome to a brand new episode of Plaguenarr. And today I'm gonna show you how to paint the Alpha Legion again, but the difference is we will only use a brush. And we're starting off by base coating the mini with 2 to 3 thin coats of Vallejo Gunmetal Grey of the Airbrush series and simply stippling it on with a Artis Opus Series D size M brush. In the second step, we're using nylon oil as an overall wash over the mini to create a little bit of a deep shade here. And I'm applying this with a real big brush. It's an Artis Opus Series S size 4 brush. I would also recommend you to use a real big brush here and simply just flood the nylon oil all over the mini. For the third step, we're then starting to dry brush on some highlights on the mini, and we're using Monument Hobbies Pro Acrylic Silver here. I use this color because it has really tiny pigments and creates a real smooth finish. And here are 2 additional tips to get your dry brushing much smoother than simply just wiping the color off. Number 1, use a good and big brush. I'm using an Artis Opus Series D large brush here, and the larger the brush, the longer the color remains the moisture in the brush. And number 2, simply moisture your brush before you're loading it up with color and wipe off the remaining water. And to get some color on our armor, we're then mixing up 2 parts contrast medium, 1 part Acalian green, and also 1 part of Athletic blue, and thinning all of this down with a little bit of water. And to apply this mix, we're using an even bigger brush. This time it's an Artis Opus Series S size 5 brush. And the key here to create a smooth finish is that you apply 2 thin coats, panel by panel. Let each coat dry before you apply the second coat, and don't be hasty. As you can see, I speeded up the video speed a little bit just to show you a little bit more scenes in a shorter time. But take your time, apply it panel by panel. And if you reach areas that are a little bit harder to reach, like the helmet here, simply use a thinner brush. And don't worry about mistakes, we can fix them up in a later stage. If everything is dry, we can then moving on to some Abaddon Black, thinned down with 2 parts water and 1 part color, and simply base coating the weapon casing. With Vallejo Gunmetal Grey straight onto the wet palette, we can then move on to fix up our mistakes. And as you can see, I also messed a little bit up on the left shoulder pad and on the chest part where this silver circle is located, and some of the metal parts as well. You can, by the way, also use this the other way around. If you messed up somehow into the armor, simply paint with the Vallejo Gunmetal Grey again, and then stipple on a little bit of your contrast mix. To get some volumetric highlights onto the weapon casing, we're then using a mix of Vallejo Basalt Gray with 3 parts water and simply applying volumetric highlights with real messy brush strokes into the lighted direction on top. And don't be too careful in this stage. We will glaze in some black to create a little bit more of a smoother transition and also a little bit of variation. As a second highlight for the weapon casing, we're then using Vallejo Neutral Gray, this time thinned down with 2 parts water, and adding a couple of edge highlights all around the weapon casing, and also applying a little bit of a thinner, messy, volumetric highlight into the light direction on top. As a final highlight for the weapon casing, we're then using Vallejo Pale Gray Blue, mixed down with 3 parts water to 1 part paint, and we're simply adding a couple of upper reflection edge highlights. So basically highlight every edge that would face mostly the light, and then we're also adding a couple of scratches and randomness to create a little bit more of a used look. As a final step for the weapon casing, we're then going back to some Abaddon Black, and we're heavily mixing this down with water. So this is basically 4 to 5 parts water and 1 part paint. And we're using this mix into the opposite direction of the light, so in the shaded direction, just to create a little bit more of smoother transitions and a little bit more of variation as well. And then it's already time to apply our decals to the mini. We are preparing the surface by applying a full coat of Microsol, and then we're applying the decals onto the surface, and afterwards, if it's a little bit sticked onto the surface, we're smoothing it out with the brush and a little bit more of Microsol. And we're then bringing some used look and shine to the armor with Pro Acrylic Silver by highlighting all the edges. And I use here a Artis Opus Series S size 0 brush, so it's a little bit of a bigger brush for thin edge highlights. And I can also recommend you that because if the edge highlight's not that kind of sharp and smooth, you create a little bit of variation that also brings in a real realistic used look that would appear on an armor like that. We can then thin this mix a little bit down with water and highlight all of the armor bolts, some of the silver parts, especially the parts on the backpack, the parts on the face, and as well the bolts on the weapon casing and the left shoulder pad. And to support the used look a little bit more, we're then adding a couple of scratches and a little bit of armor chipping over the armor and decals as well. And to bring in even a little bit more of used look and highlight some of the sharper edges a little bit more in a messy style and bring in some tiny volumetric highlights, we're then using our large Artis Opus Series D brush again and loading it up with our Pro Acrylic Silver and simply doing really gently brush strokes into the direction of the edges. In the next step, we're starting to create our foundation for the red glowing plasma into the plasma gun, and we're simply base coating all the plasma coils with a mix of 1 part water and 1 part Monument Hobbies Pro Acryl White. To create our plasma color, we're then using 1 part Bold Pyrrole Red and 1 part Glaze and Wash Medium and 1 part water as well, and creating a thin glaze which we will glaze into the upper direction of the plasma coils to create a smooth transition between the white and the red. We can then thin this mix a little bit down with water and use this into the ventilation of the plasma gun as well. With 1 part Bold Pyrrole Red, 1 part Bold Titanium White and 1 part Glaze and Wash Medium, we can then create a translucent mix to highlight all the surrounding edges of the plasma coils and create a little bit of a glowing effect on the plasma gun. To create our light reflections, we're then using 1 part Bold Pyrrole Red, 1 part Glaze and Wash Medium, and glazing in volumetric highlights into the direction of the light source and simulate a glowing effect. And to enhance the feeling of the glowing effect, we're mixing up 1 part Bold Pyrrole Red, 1 part Bold Titanium White, and highlighting all the edges where we applied volumetric glowing highlights. To enhance this glowing effect even a little bit more, we're then adding a little bit of Glaze and Wash Medium to our highlight mix and glazing in a small volumetric highlight on top of our already existing highlights. As a base layer for our eye lenses, we're using pure Bold Pyrrole Red. Then we're adding a small highlight round about 2/3 of the size of the eye lens by adding a tiny amount of white. Then we're adding another tiny amount of white and painting this highlight in 1/3 of the front of the eye lens and finishing up with a tiny white dot in the upper left corner. And then it's time to finish up our mini with a full coat of Vallejo Premium Satin Varnish and take a look onto our final result. Thank you everybody for watching, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe.